For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On November 3, 1995, 34-year-old Catherine Williams disappeared without a trace from her home in Millbrook, Connecticut, leaving behind her 2 children and a husband who claimed to have no idea what had happened to his wife. The mother of 14-year-old Rachel and 10-year-old Michael had seemed to vanish into thin air, with no evidence of struggle, no goodbye note, and no explanation for her sudden absence. Despite an extensive investigation by local police and the Connecticut State Police, Catherine's disappearance remained a mystery. Her husband, Robert Williams, maintained that Catherine had simply left one morning and never returned, suggesting she might have abandoned her family voluntarily. The case gradually went cold as investigators exhausted their leads. For 3 years, Rachel and Michael Williams lived with their father and the devastating uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to their mother. Then, in August 1998, while helping her father clean out the attic in preparation for selling the family home, 17-year-old Rachel made a discovery that would finally answer the questions that had haunted her family for years. Hidden behind old Christmas decorations and forgotten furniture, Rachel found a sealed cardboard box that contained evidence her father had never wanted anyone to find. Inside that box were clues that would not only solve her mother's disappearance but would also reveal a truth more shocking than anyone could have imagined. This is the complete investigation into Catherine Williams' disappearance, from the initial missing person report in 1995 to the devastating discovery that would expose how a mother's murder had been hidden in plain sight for 3 long years. Chapter 1: The Disappearing Act. November 3, 1995 began as an ordinary Friday morning in the Williams household on Maple Street in Millbrook, Connecticut. Catherine Williams, 34, had followed her usual routine of getting her children ready for school and preparing breakfast for the family before what would become her final day. Catherine was a devoted mother who worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a local accounting firm while managing the household and caring for her 2 children. Her 14-year-old daughter Rachel was a freshman at Millbrook High School, while 10-year-old Michael was in 5th grade at the local elementary school. Robert Williams, Catherine's husband of 16 years, worked as a sales manager for a regional manufacturing company. The family lived in a modest 2-story colonial home in a quiet suburban neighborhood where Catherine had many friends and was active in community activities. According to Robert's later testimony to investigators, Catherine had seemed completely normal that morning. She had prepared breakfast, helped the children get ready for school, and discussed weekend plans for Michael's upcoming soccer game. Robert claimed there had been no arguments or signs that anything was troubling his wife. Robert left for work at approximately 8:15 a.m., kissing Catherine goodbye and telling her he would be home around 6 p.m. The children had already left for school on the bus at 7:45 a.m., leaving Catherine alone in the house to begin her day. Catherine's part-time work schedule had her going into the accounting office on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On this particular Friday, she was expected to arrive at work by 10 a.m. to help with month-end bookkeeping tasks for several client accounts. When Catherine failed to arrive at work by 10:30 a.m., her supervisor, Margaret Chen, called the Williams home. The phone rang several times but went unanswered, which was unusual for Catherine, who was typically very reliable about communication and rarely late for work. Margaret tried calling again at 11 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., becoming increasingly concerned when Catherine didn't answer the phone or arrive at the office. Catherine had never missed work without calling, and her absence was completely out of character. At noon, Margaret decided to drive to the Williams home to check on Catherine. When she arrived at the house, she found Catherine's car still parked in the driveway, and all the lights in the house were turned off. When Margaret knocked on the front door, no one answered. Growing worried, Margaret called Robert at his office to ask if he knew why Catherine hadn't come to work. Robert seemed surprised and concerned, telling Margaret that Catherine had been fine when he left for work that morning and that he had no idea why she wouldn't be at the office. Robert left work immediately and arrived home at approximately 12:45 p.m. to find Margaret still waiting in the driveway. Together, they used Robert's key to enter the house, calling Catherine's name and searching for any sign of where she might have gone. The house appeared normal, with no signs of struggle or disturbance. Catherine's purse was missing, as were her house keys and winter coat, suggesting that she had left the house voluntarily. However, her car remained in the driveway, indicating that she had either walked somewhere or had left with someone else. Robert checked with neighbors to see if anyone had seen Catherine leave the house or noticed any unusual activity during the morning. Mrs. Dorothy Walsh, who lived next door, reported seeing Catherine retrieving her newspaper from the driveway around 8:30 a.m., about 15 minutes after Robert had left for work. This was the last confirmed sighting of Catherine Williams. She had simply vanished sometime between 8:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. on November 3, 1995, leaving no trace of where she had gone or why she had left. When Rachel and Michael returned from school that afternoon, they found their father and Margaret Chen waiting for them with the news that their mother was missing. The children were confused and frightened, having never known their mother to leave without explanation. Robert called the Millbrook Police Department at 3:30 p.m. to report Catherine missing. The responding officer, Sergeant James Morrison, took a detailed report and began the initial investigation into Catherine's disappearance. Sergeant Morrison's first concern was whether Catherine might have left voluntarily due to marital problems or personal issues. He interviewed Robert extensively about the couple's relationship and any recent stress or conflicts that might have prompted Catherine to leave. Robert insisted that his marriage was stable and that Catherine was happy with her life in Millbrook. He acknowledged that they had occasional disagreements like any couple, but nothing that would cause Catherine to abandon her children, whom she adored. The investigation revealed that Catherine had no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or previous disappearances. She was described by friends and family as a responsible, caring mother who would never leave her children voluntarily. However, the absence of any signs of struggle or forced entry at the house raised questions about whether Catherine had indeed left voluntarily. The fact that she had taken her purse and coat suggested that she had planned to go somewhere, though no one knew where or why. By evening on November 3rd, Catherine Williams had been missing for approximately 7 hours. The initial investigation had revealed no obvious explanation for her disappearance, and the case was beginning to take on the characteristics of a serious missing person investigation. The mystery deepened as investigators realized that Catherine had vanished from a secure, familiar environment during daylight hours, with no witnesses and no apparent motive for leaving. Something had happened to interrupt Catherine's normal Friday morning routine, and that something had left her family devastated and searching for answers. Chapter 2: The Investigation. The search for Catherine Williams intensified on November 4, 1995, as the Millbrook Police Department recognized that her disappearance was highly unusual and potentially sinister. Detective Lisa Rodriguez was assigned as the lead investigator, bringing 8 years of experience in missing person cases to what would become one of the most challenging investigations of her career. Detective Rodriguez began with a comprehensive interview of Robert Williams, focusing on the couple's relationship, their financial situation, and any recent changes in Catherine's behavior or routine. Robert appeared genuinely concerned about his wife's disappearance and was cooperative in providing information. Robert told investigators that Catherine had been her normal self in the days leading up to her disappearance. They had made plans for the weekend, discussed Christmas shopping for the children, and had been looking forward to their upcoming wedding anniversary in December. The couple's financial records showed no unusual transactions or withdrawals that might suggest Catherine had been planning to leave. Their joint checking account remained untouched, and Catherine's credit cards had not been used since her disappearance. Detective Rodriguez also interviewed Catherine's friends, co-workers, and family members to develop a complete picture of her state of mind and daily activities. Everyone described Catherine as a devoted mother who was happy with her life and had no apparent reason to disappear voluntarily. Catherine's best friend, Susan Martinez, told investigators that she had spoken with Catherine by phone on November 2nd, the evening before her disappearance. Catherine was excited about Thanksgiving plans and was looking forward to having her sister visit from Boston, Susan said. She definitely wasn't acting like someone who was planning to leave. The physical search for Catherine began with a systematic canvass of the Millbrook area. Search teams checked local parks, wooded areas, shopping centers, and any location where Catherine might have gone or where she might have been taken against her will. The Connecticut State Police provided additional resources, including search dogs trained to track missing persons. The dogs were given items of Catherine's clothing to establish her scent, then taken to various locations around Millbrook to attempt to pick up her trail. The search dogs picked up Catherine's scent near the Williams home but lost it at the end of the driveway, suggesting that she had gotten into a vehicle rather than walking to her destination. This discovery supported the theory that Catherine had either left voluntarily with someone or had been abducted. Detective Rodriguez investigated the possibility that Catherine had been having an affair or had developed a relationship that her husband didn't know about. However, extensive investigation of Catherine's phone records, personal belongings, and daily activities revealed no evidence of any romantic relationships outside her marriage. The investigation also examined Catherine's work environment and relationships with co-workers and clients at the accounting firm. All of Catherine's professional relationships appeared to be appropriate and platonic, with no indication of any conflicts or inappropriate behavior. One concerning aspect of the investigation was the discovery that Robert Williams had a history of controlling behavior in his marriage. Several of Catherine's friends mentioned that Robert could be jealous and possessive, though none reported any evidence of physical abuse. Catherine's sister, Patricia Wilson, who lived in Boston, told investigators that Catherine had occasionally mentioned feeling suffocated by Robert's attention but had never expressed fear for her safety. Patricia said that Catherine loved her children too much to ever leave them voluntarily. As the investigation progressed, Detective Rodriguez became increasingly suspicious of Robert's behavior and his explanations for Catherine's disappearance. While he appeared to be cooperating with the investigation, some of his statements didn't seem entirely consistent with known facts. Robert claimed that he had been at work all morning on November 3rd and could provide witnesses to verify his whereabouts. However, when investigators checked with his co-workers, they found that Robert had actually left the office for about 2 hours that morning, claiming he had a client meeting. When confronted about this discrepancy, Robert admitted that he had lied about his whereabouts but claimed that he had actually gone to a hardware store to purchase supplies for home repairs. He said he had been embarrassed to admit that he hadn't really been working during company time. However, investigators were unable to verify Robert's claims about visiting the hardware store. Store employees couldn't remember seeing him, and he had no receipts or other evidence to support his story about purchasing supplies. The timeline discrepancy made Robert a person of interest in Catherine's disappearance. Detective Rodriguez obtained a search warrant for the Williams home and property, looking for any evidence that might explain what had happened to Catherine. The search of the Williams home revealed no obvious signs of violence or struggle. However, investigators did notice that the basement had been recently cleaned, with the concrete floor appearing to have been scrubbed with bleach. Robert claimed that he had been cleaning the basement as part of routine home maintenance. Forensic testing of the basement floor revealed traces of blood that had been cleaned with bleach, though the amount was too small to determine its source definitively. The discovery of blood evidence increased suspicion that Catherine might have been killed in her own home. Meanwhile, the search for Catherine's body expanded to include wooded areas, bodies of water, and construction sites throughout central Connecticut. Despite extensive efforts involving hundreds of volunteers and professional search teams, no trace of Catherine was found. The case received significant media attention throughout Connecticut, with Catherine's photograph appearing in newspapers and on television news programs. The publicity generated numerous tips from the public, but most proved to be false leads or cases of mistaken identity. As November 1995 turned into December, Catherine Williams had been missing for over a month without any confirmed sightings or physical evidence of her fate. The investigation continued, but Detective Rodriguez was increasingly convinced that Catherine had been murdered and that her husband was responsible. However, without Catherine's body or conclusive physical evidence, prosecutors felt they didn't have enough evidence to charge Robert Williams with any crime. The case gradually transitioned from an active investigation to a cold case, though it remained technically open. Chapter 3: Living with Secrets. The years following Catherine Williams' disappearance were marked by a strange and tense normalcy in the Williams household. Robert continued working and raising Rachel and Michael as a single parent, while always maintaining his innocence and expressing hope that Catherine would someday return home. For Rachel and Michael, their mother's disappearance created a complex emotional landscape. They grieved for their missing mother while trying to maintain normal teenage and childhood experiences under their father's care. The uncertainty about Catherine's fate made it impossible to properly process their loss. Robert Williams appeared to be a devoted single father, attending his children's school events, helping with homework, and maintaining the household routines that Catherine had established. To outsiders, he seemed to be coping remarkably well with the tragedy of his wife's disappearance. However, Those close to the family noticed changes in Robert's behavior following Catherine's disappearance. He became more controlling of the children's activities and seemed anxious when they spent time with Catherine's friends or family members who continued to question what had happened. Rachel, in particular, began to notice inconsistencies in her father's stories about the day her mother disappeared. As she matured from a 14-year-old into a teenager, she became more observant and started asking more pointed questions about the circumstances of Catherine's vanishing. Robert's explanations for Catherine's disappearance evolved over time. Initially, he had suggested that Catherine might have had some kind of mental breakdown and wandered away. Later, he began hinting that Catherine might have been having an affair and had run away with another man. These changing narratives troubled Rachel, who remembered her mother as a stable, loving person who would never abandon her children. Rachel began keeping a journal where she recorded her father's various explanations and noted the contradictions between them. Detective Rodriguez maintained periodic contact with the Williams family, checking for any new information or changes in Robert's story. She continued to believe that Robert was responsible for Catherine's disappearance, but without new evidence, there was little she could do to advance the case. In 1996, 1 year after Catherine's disappearance, the family held a memorial service at their local church. The service was attended by Catherine's friends, co-workers, and extended family, though some noticed that Robert seemed uncomfortable with the attention and questions from attendees. During the memorial service, Catherine's sister Patricia made an emotional speech about keeping hope alive and continuing to search for answers. She also announced that she was offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to the discovery of Catherine's whereabouts. The reward offer generated renewed media attention and several new tips, but none provided useful information about Catherine's fate. Detective Rodriguez followed up on each lead, but the case remained unsolved as 1996 turned into 1997. Rachel Williams was now 16 years old and increasingly independent. She had maintained close relationships with her mother's friends and family, particularly her Aunt Patricia, who had become a surrogate mother figure and source of emotional support. During visits with Patricia in Boston, Rachel began to share her growing suspicions about her father's involvement in her mother's disappearance. Patricia had harbored similar suspicions but had been reluctant to voice them without evidence. Rachel told her aunt about the inconsistencies in Robert's stories and about strange behavior she had observed in the months following Catherine's disappearance. She mentioned that her father had thrown away many of Catherine's belongings very quickly, claiming that keeping them was too painful. Patricia encouraged Rachel to document anything unusual she observed and to be careful about confronting her father directly with her suspicions. Both women agreed that finding concrete evidence would be necessary to prove what they increasingly believed to be true. In early 1998, Robert announced to his children that he was planning to sell the family home and move to a smaller house across town. He explained that the current house held too many painful memories of their mother and that a fresh start would be good for the family. Rachel was devastated by the prospect of leaving the house where she had lived with her mother. She felt that moving would somehow be abandoning Catherine's memory and eliminating any chance that her mother might someday return home. However, Rachel realized that the move might also provide an opportunity to search areas of the house that had been inaccessible or that her father had claimed were off-limits. She was particularly interested in the attic, which Robert had always said was too dangerous for the children to explore. In July 1998, as the family prepared for their move, Robert asked Rachel and Michael to help clean out the attic and pack items that would be donated to charity. This would be Rachel's first opportunity to thoroughly explore the space where her family had stored belongings for years. As Rachel climbed into the attic on that fateful day in August 1998, she had no idea that she was about to discover evidence that would finally solve the mystery of her mother's disappearance. The sealed box she would find hidden among the Christmas decorations contained secrets that would change her life forever and finally bring justice for Catherine Williams. The truth about Catherine's fate had been hidden just above Rachel's head for nearly 3 years, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. That moment was about to arrive, bringing with it answers that would be both relieving and devastating for a daughter who had never stopped searching for her mother. Chapter 4: The Discovery. August 15, 1998 was a sweltering summer day when 17-year-old Rachel Williams climbed the narrow stairs to the attic of her family's home on Maple Street. The attic was stifling hot and filled with dust, boxes, and forgotten furniture that had accumulated over the family's 12 years in the house. Robert Williams had asked his children to help sort through the attic contents to determine what should be kept, donated, or thrown away before their move to the new house. Rachel approached the task with mixed emotions, knowing that sorting through family belongings would bring back memories of her mother. The attic was cramped and poorly lit, requiring Rachel to use a flashlight to see into the darker corners. She began with the items near the stairs, working systematically through boxes of holiday decorations, old clothes, and childhood toys that she and Michael had outgrown. As Rachel moved deeper into the attic, she noticed that one area behind the Christmas decorations seemed unusually organized compared to the general clutter. A stack of boxes in the far corner appeared to have been deliberately arranged and hadn't accumulated the same layer of dust as other items. One box in particular caught Rachel's attention. It was a brown cardboard banker's box that had been sealed with packing tape and was unmarked, unlike the other storage boxes that were labeled with their contents. The box was heavy and seemed to contain something substantial. Rachel's first instinct was to call down to her father to ask about the mysterious box, but something made her hesitate. Over the past 3 years, she had developed a deep suspicion about her father's role in her mother's disappearance, and the carefully hidden box seemed potentially significant. Instead of alerting her father, Rachel carefully moved the box to an area where she could examine it more closely. The packing tape was old and yellowed, suggesting that the box had been sealed for a considerable time, possibly dating back to around the time of her mother's disappearance. Using a small knife she had brought to open other boxes, Rachel carefully cut through the tape and opened the sealed container. What she found inside would immediately confirm her worst fears about her father and provide evidence that would finally solve her mother's case. The box contained her mother's missing purse, along with Catherine's wallet, keys, and personal items that had supposedly been taken when she disappeared. More disturbing were numerous photographs of Catherine that appeared to have been taken without her knowledge, showing her in various locations around Millbrook. Among the photographs was a collection of what appeared to be surveillance images showing Catherine's daily routines, walking to her car, entering the grocery store, picking up the children from school. The photos suggested that someone had been watching Catherine extensively before her disappearance. Most shocking was a handwritten journal that documented what appeared to be her father's growing obsession with controlling Catherine's activities and his increasing anger about her interactions with friends and co-workers. The journal entries became progressively more violent and threatening. The final entries in the journal, dated just days before Catherine's disappearance, described detailed plans for teaching Catherine a lesson and ensuring that she would never leave again. The implications of these entries were clear and terrifying to Rachel. At the bottom of the box, Rachel found a small digital camera and several rolls of undeveloped film. The camera was a model that had been released in 1995, around the time of her mother's disappearance, and appeared to contain additional evidence related to the case. Rachel sat in the hot attic for several minutes, processing the implications of what she had discovered. The evidence in the box clearly indicated that her father had been responsible for her mother's disappearance and had been planning it for some time before November 3, 1995. The discovery confirmed Rachel's long-held suspicions about her father's involvement in Catherine's fate, but it also raised new questions about where her mother's body might be located and exactly what had happened on that November morning 3 years earlier. Rachel realized that she needed to get the evidence to law enforcement immediately, but she also understood that she needed to be careful about how she handled the situation. Her father was downstairs and would likely become dangerous if he discovered that his secret had been exposed. Thinking quickly, Rachel used her cell phone to call her Aunt Patricia in Boston, whispering urgently about her discovery and asking for advice about what to do next. Patricia immediately understood the significance of what Rachel had found and advised her to contact Detective Rodriguez directly. Rachel carefully resealed the box and moved it to a location where her father wouldn't notice it had been disturbed. She then continued sorting through other attic items for a few more minutes to maintain the appearance of normal activity before going downstairs. When Robert asked about her progress in the attic, Rachel calmly reported that she had sorted through several boxes and would continue working the next day. She showed no outward sign of the earth-shattering discovery she had just made about her mother's murder. That evening, while her father was watching television with Michael, Rachel quietly called Detective Rodriguez from her bedroom. In hushed tones, she described finding the sealed box and its contents, providing the breakthrough that investigators had been seeking for nearly 3 years. Detective Rodriguez immediately recognized the significance of Rachel's discovery and arranged to meet with her the following day to examine the evidence. However, Rodriguez also warned Rachel to be extremely careful around her father until the evidence could be secured and arrests could be made. The sealed box that had been hidden in the Williams family attic for 3 years contained the key to finally bringing justice for Catherine Williams. The evidence would not only solve her murder but would also reveal the calculated nature of a crime that had been planned and concealed by someone Catherine had trusted most. Chapter 5. The Truth Revealed. Detective Rodriguez met with Rachel Williams on August 16, 1998, at the Millbrook Police Department, where Rachel provided the sealed box she had discovered in her family's attic. The contents of the box would finally provide the evidence needed to solve Catherine Williams' murder and bring her killer to justice. The examination of the box's contents immediately confirmed what Detective Rodriguez had suspected for 3 years, that Robert Williams had been responsible for his wife's disappearance and murder. The evidence was overwhelming and provided a clear picture of premeditation and careful planning. The photographs found in the box showed that Robert had been systematically stalking his own wife in the weeks before her disappearance, documenting her daily routines and interactions with other people. The surveillance-style images indicated an obsessive level of monitoring that Catherine had apparently been unaware of. The handwritten journal contained increasingly disturbing entries that documented Robert's growing paranoia about Catherine's activities and his belief that she was planning to leave him. The entries revealed a pattern of possessive and controlling behavior that had escalated to threats of violence. Most damning was the final journal entry, dated November 2, 1995, which outlined Robert's plan to confront Catherine about his suspicions and to make sure she never abandons her family. The entry made it clear that Robert had been planning his wife's murder at least 1 day before he carried it out. The digital camera found in the box contained additional evidence that would prove crucial to the case. When the camera's memory was examined by forensic specialists, it revealed images that had been taken on November 3, 1995, showing Catherine's body in the basement of the Williams home. The photographs showed that Robert had killed Catherine in their basement and had documented the scene, possibly as a form of trophy or as evidence for his own twisted purposes. The images were disturbing but provided conclusive proof that Catherine had been murdered in her own home. The forensic analysis also revealed that Robert had used the basement's concrete floor to dispose of evidence, explaining the bleach cleaning that investigators had discovered during their initial search of the house. However, Robert had been more thorough in concealing the crime than investigators had initially realized. The investigation revealed that after killing Catherine in the basement, Robert had transported her body to a remote location in the Connecticut woods where he had buried her remains. The journal contained a hand-drawn map showing the burial location, approximately 30 miles from Millbrook. Using the map found in Robert's journal, investigators located Catherine's burial site on August 18, 1998. The remains were found exactly where Robert had indicated, confirming the accuracy of his written confession, and finally allowing Catherine's family to lay her to rest. The forensic examination of Catherine's remains confirmed that she had died from blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with being struck by a heavy object. The examination also revealed that Catherine had defensive wounds on her hands, indicating that she had fought for her life. The evidence showed that Robert had killed Catherine during the 2-hour period when he had left work on November 3, 1995, claiming to have a client meeting. He had returned home, confronted Catherine about his suspicions, and killed her during the ensuing argument. After murdering his wife, Robert had spent the afternoon disposing of evidence and creating the false narrative that Catherine had simply disappeared. He had hidden her purse and personal items in the attic, knowing that they would eventually need to be discovered if his story was to be believed. Robert's plan had been sophisticated and nearly successful. By claiming that Catherine had taken her purse and left voluntarily, he had misdirected the investigation away from the possibility that she had been murdered in her own home. The missing personal items had supported his story for 3 years. However, Robert had made the critical error of keeping evidence rather than destroying it completely. His decision to hide Catherine's belongings and his journal in the attic had been motivated by a combination of sentimentality and his belief that the evidence would never be discovered. On August 20, 1998, Robert Williams was arrested at his workplace and charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Catherine. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including his own written confession, photographs of the crime scene, and the location of Catherine's body. Robert initially attempted to deny the charges, claiming that the evidence had been planted by someone else. However, when confronted with the handwriting analysis that confirmed the journal was in his hand, and the forensic evidence linking him to the crime, he eventually confessed. The confession revealed that Robert had become convinced that Catherine was planning to leave him and take the children, despite having no evidence to support this belief. His possessive and controlling nature had escalated to paranoid delusions that had ultimately led to murder. Robert's trial began in early 1999, where the evidence from the sealed box was presented to a jury that quickly convicted him of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again pose a threat to anyone. For Rachel and Michael Williams, their father's conviction provided closure but also forced them to confront the devastating reality that their own father had murdered their mother and had been lying to them for 3 years. The family underwent extensive counseling to help process the trauma. Rachel's courage in investigating her suspicions and bringing the evidence to law enforcement was praised by investigators and became an example of how family members can play a crucial role in solving crimes when law enforcement resources are limited. The Catherine Williams case became a landmark in domestic violence investigation, demonstrating how abusers can successfully deceive investigators and family members for years while maintaining the facade of being devoted husbands and fathers. The case also highlighted the importance of preserving crime scenes and evidence, as Robert's decision to keep his wife's belongings had ultimately led to his conviction when that evidence was discovered 3 years after the murder. Final words: the conviction of Robert Williams in 1999 brought closure to one of Connecticut's most heartbreaking domestic violence cases. Catherine Williams' murder had been successfully concealed for 3 years until her own daughter's discovery of hidden evidence finally brought justice. Rachel Williams' courage in investigating her suspicions and preserving evidence became an inspiration for other families dealing with domestic violence and missing person cases. Her actions demonstrated that persistence and careful observation could solve even the most carefully concealed crimes. The case led to significant improvements in how law enforcement investigates missing person cases involving domestic partners, particularly emphasizing the importance of thoroughly searching family homes and maintaining suspicion of spouses who seem too helpful or whose stories change over time. Catherine's story became part of domestic violence education programs, highlighting how abusers can maintain facades of being loving partners while harboring dangerous obsessions and control issues. The case showed how domestic violence could escalate to murder even in seemingly stable relationships. Rachel and Michael Williams eventually rebuilt their lives with the support of their extended family and professional counseling. Rachel became an advocate for domestic violence victims and missing person families, using her experience to help others find answers and justice. The sealed box in the Williams family attic had contained secrets that were meant to stay hidden forever. Instead, it became the key that unlocked justice for Catherine Williams and demonstrated that even the most carefully planned crimes could be solved when someone had the courage to keep searching for the truth. Today, Catherine Williams' legacy lives on through the improved investigative techniques and domestic violence awareness programs that were developed following her case. Her story serves as a reminder that justice can prevail even when it seems like the truth has been buried forever.